Nicholas Latifi has had a horrible start to his 2022 campaign. He's always had a paid driver tag on his name since joining the sport, and despite being in his third season in Formula 1, he's failed to prove his worth this year so far. So what's gone wrong for Nicholas Latifi, and can he really stay in the sport based on these performances? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Kept on for experience. Latifi was kept on by Williams following what was an average 2021 season. He helped score Williams' first F1 points in a couple of years with his 7th place finish in Hungary, and as such, he'd helped the team progress from the back of the grid to 8th last year. Going into the new regulations of 2022, the team were in a financial position where they didn't need the support that Latifi offered in that department, with Doralton Capital buying the team and the cost cap in place, meaning that it wasn't critical for the team's survival. However, he was kept on for this season to partner Alex Albon. For me, the reason Latifi was kept on this year was to offer the Williams team some more continuity with previous years. Development is even more crucial this season compared to previous ones, and so having a driver that they've received feedback from before would be beneficial in that department as they try to set the direction of car development through the year. This approach from Williams seems logical. They want to have familiarity in the feedback to ensure that they have a good understanding of the desired direction of development. But I would argue that the team's priority should have instead been focused on ensuring that they had the best possible drivers to achieve the maximum from their car. Look at Haas, for example. Without Kevin Magnussen, that car wouldn't be perceived as being anywhere near as good as it is after 5 races. In the season so far, Latifi has been significantly behind his new teammate. He's been beaten by Albon in every race so far this season and has only achieved a best result of 14th place. And this only came in Miami, where there were 15 finishes, with Latifi only beating Schumacher because the German driver had significant damage and was forced to take a late pit stop. Meanwhile, Albon has been managing to get the Williams car much closer to the points-paying positions, achieving a great result in Australia with a brilliant strategy call to remain on the hard tyres for almost the entire Grand Prix and grab a point at the end of it, followed by an 11th position in Italy and then another couple of points from a great race in Miami. It's this ability to drag a car further up the order that seems like Latifi is lacking right now. The achievements of the Hungarian Grand Prix from last season seem to be a long and distant memory for the Canadian driver. Not only has Latifi been behind on track, but his season has been full of silly mistakes which have been costly for the team, which tends to not exactly be flush for cash. In qualifying in Jeddah, Latifi crashed in Q1, triggering a red flag. This isn't exactly unusual around the street circuit in Saudi Arabia, but in the race, Latifi got understeer through the last corner as he ended up heading off into the barrier once again. So he had 2 significant crashes at a single race weekend. At the following race in Australia, Latifi was involved in a big crash once again, but this time it was with Lance Stroll, where the Williams driver let Stroll by before overtaking him again whilst on a qualifying outlap. On this occasion, I believe the Aston Martin driver was predominantly to blame, but you have to ask the question of what on earth Latifi was doing letting his competitor by before going straight back past him. These mistakes are not only bad for Latifi's confidence, but they are also incredibly costly for the team, as they're forced to produce more parts for the existing car rather than bringing new developments for their 2022 Challenger. With the car as difficult as it is to drive, it's all the more important that they're able to bring new parts to help progress up the order. But ultimately, if it was experience that kept Latifi in that position in the first place for this year, for me, it's probably caused more harm than good for the Grove-based team. Which begs the question of whether Latifi can possibly keep hold of that seat, and there's already talk of him potentially losing it during this season. Often, teams make mid-season changes to their drivers at the summer break, which is when I'm aiming to get to 50,000 subscribers by. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Thanks. Who could replace Latifi? So we've already noted the new look Williams team do not need Latifi's money to stay afloat, and that the Canadian driver has potentially slowed them down in terms of their 2022 development. And as a result, there are rumours circling already regarding his ability to keep hold of that seat, and he may be potentially replaced midway through this season. The hotly tipped replacement is Oscar Piastri, the young Alpine-backed driver that is incredibly talented. He achieved 3 championship victories back-to-back, with wins in Formula Renault, Formula 3, and then last season in Formula 2. This kind of run through the junior categories is incredibly rare, and he's rightfully up there in the conversation with the likes of Charles Leclerc and George Russell when it comes to his talent based on these feeder Formula performances. Piastri is widely regarded as a future Formula 1 driver, but it's simply a question of opportunity. As a young Alpine driver, there are just 2 Renault-powered seats on the grid right now with the Alpine Works team. This means that it's difficult for a rookie to take the seat of an established driver, and so finding a chance to get onto the grid is perhaps more difficult for Piastri than many other drivers in other junior academies. Williams is perhaps a great option for Alpine and Piastri. There's already a precedent of a driver from outside of the engine manufacturer's scope coming into the team, as Alex Albon maintained his Red Bull links despite joining the Mercedes-powered team. So this implies that a link between Alpine and Williams could yet be forged as well. The environment alongside Albon would be great for Oscar Piastri. He's a driver that has great potential, and Alex Albon could be a good mentor and role model for him to work with. Albon's driver coaching work with Yuki Tsunoda in 2021 was valuable for the young Japanese driver, and so he could surely support the young Australian driver as well. But there would remain a question over what Williams would get from a driver pairing that is wholly associated with their competitors. The Williams team has a driver academy itself, so if they have a team full of drivers from elsewhere, it begs the question of whether that investment is even worth it for them. There would also be risks associated with the long-term future of that driver lineup. There could be a scenario where Williams ended up driverless after next year as the drivers get called back to their parent teams. For me, I think it's something that doesn't align with the team's longer-term goals of getting back to the front, and a move to have 2 drivers on loan from other teams would feel like a commitment to remain part of the midfield and become a development centre for the other team's drivers. Having said this, Alex Albon is in a different kind of loan scenario to previous years. It isn't like the George Russell situation where he went to Williams for 3 seasons to prove himself and then progress up to Mercedes. Given the trajectory of Albon's career, this is more of a lifeline and a great opportunity for the driver to establish himself back into the sport. Unless Red Bull have a driver problem at the main team, I believe he could get to a point where Williams can build the team around Albon in the long term, and those Red Bull links may well be broken. So is Piastri a better option than Latifi? Well, I suppose Latifi offers some level of stability and certainty, and he's an option that Williams would be able to keep hold of if they wanted that continuity as they did for this season. But perhaps this might not be necessary if Albon is kept on for the long term. Piastri may offer more raw speed than Latifi in the first place, which would allow them to progress further up the order and get more out of this car. There are, of course, risks with taking on a rookie when it comes to mistakes and damaged cars, but this is exactly what they've experienced with Latifi this year, so perhaps it feels like less of a risk to go with the unproven driver and roll the dice. Alternatively, there are other drivers that could be considered for this drive, including the likes of Nick de Vries, a driver that Mercedes would want to back as a long-term replacement for Lewis Hamilton at their works team and would want to give an opportunity to get onto the F1 grid. And then there are of course the options from within the Williams Driver Academy as well, such as Logan Sargent, but these options feel less likely right now when it comes to this potentially vacant Williams seat. The long-term future at Williams. So there's a big debate for the leadership team at Williams. They have long-term ambitions of progressing back to the front of the grid, and they say that they don't require the financial support from keeping a pay driver in that team. However, right now, their actions when it comes to their driver lineup doesn't match that long-term ambition. I think that bringing Alex Albon into the team was ideal for them. He's the perfect driver to build the team around as he tries to rebuild his reputation in Formula 1, and assuming he doesn't get recalled to the Red Bull-owned teams, I believe he will succeed with Williams in the long run. It seems like Albon is keen to stick with them in the long run as well. In an interview for the Beyond the Grid podcast, Albon talked about his desire to stick with the team. However, I believe Latifi's days are numbered when it comes to his involvement with Williams. His performances have been below par for a driver that has over 2 years' experience in the sport, and the damage sustained from his incidents is likely to be holding the team back right now. So I think a change will come for the team, whether it's during this season or for next year. Whether the best option is Piastri remains to be seen. There may well be other options that Williams may look at if they have more time to decide, and they might want to wait on the rest of the driver transfer market to see if they could pick up a driver with a bit more experience. For me, I think a lineup of Piastri and Albon would be great for them and great for the team, And if they can pull Albon away from his Red Bull tyres, then he might well be a great fit for the team in the long run. Latifi needs to improve his performances if he wants to keep his spot on the F1 grid. He's the driver in Formula 1 that's the most at risk of losing his seat right now. Without significant improvements this year, he'll surely be dropped before too long. And if you want to learn more about his potential replacement, then make sure you watch this video next.